Welcome to Shenkman Education. My name is Marty Shenkman. The topic of this video clip is how to use a revocable trust to insulate assets from a divorce. This is a very limited application, but it's an interesting and different application of revocable trusts, which are so commonly used to avoid probate. You can use a revocable trust if you're planning to get married and you're not willing to take on an irrevocable trust or more complex planning to provide some safeguards of your assets that are separate property, premarital property, before you get married. So for example, if you have, and you could even do it after you're married, but preferable to do it before, you could segregate premarital or separate property into a revocable trust, and you would designate it as a revocable separate property trust. And I would recite in the recital clauses in the beginning of the trust that it is designed for separate property and intended to maintain the identity of separate property. I would attach to it schedules of the assets being transferred in to demonstrate and prove that they're separate property. It could be as simple as a copy of a brokerage statement with your name on it and predates, let's say, your marriage. Or if it's after the marriage, you'd want other assets to show that these are separate, non-commingled, meaning not mixed with marital assets. It's better if you can, but it's much more costly and complex to administer, to create an inheritance trust before you get the assets. So if the parent's leaving you money, they can create a trust for you, much safer. The next best option is to create a self-settled trust in one of the approximately 20 states that accept those trusts and have an independent institutional trustee. Many people, it's too late, they've already inherited the assets or they have separate property they earned before they're getting married, and they're not willing to spend that money and incur the complexity of a self-settled trust. You have to go to a jurisdiction that permits it, hire an institutional trustee, and so on. Good plan, but if you're not willing to do that, use an revocable inheritance trust or a revocable separate property or premarital property trust. What I would also recommend is you get a separate tax ID number for the trust, which may help minimize commingling of assets with later marital assets. You should also very carefully consider where you pay income tax out of for that trust. You might want to pay it from the trust assets itself or other separate property and not from marital assets, because if you pay it from marital assets, then what you're risking is that your spouse, if there's a later divorce, could say, hey, marital assets were used to pay the income tax cost on those separate assets, and there should be a claim against them. Now that claim may just be satisfied with an accounting of how much tax was paid on separate property from marital assets and repay that to the marital estate with interest or something like that, but at least you maintain the identity. Keep in mind there's obvious limitations on this. If it's a revocable trust, you can change at any time. A court's not going to ignore the income necessarily from the trust, but it should maintain the separate identity of the separate property. Thank you for joining me. Remember not to take any legal action without first getting professional advice. This information is for educational purposes only. And finally, for more information, go to shenkmaneducation.com. Thank you.